After spending many hours binge watching Fallout, the TV show, which was fantastic, if you guys haven't seen it yet, definitely recommend it. We're going to be making our own Fallout inspired character today. And I got an idea, and he's going to have a very large head. So, when you're doing like a giant sculpture like this, that's going to be really heavy with tons of clay, it's very important to have a pretty strong armature. So, all I did was get a floor flange and a steel pipe and screw it into the base of the wood there. Can't really see it, but trust me, it's screwed in there. Then you twist that pipe into the floor flange and you have a pretty sturdy base. And this isn't gonna hold more than enough. It's gonna be very strong. It's gonna be strong enough to hold up tens of pounds of clay, especially like if it's monster clay, oil-based clay. That stuff tends to get pretty heavy pretty quickly the more you add onto it. And this dude, well, he's gonna be pretty heavy. It's gonna be pretty heavy because I want this guy to have a big head. So my whole idea for this guy is, his Fallout inspired character. Just kind of making him up on the fly. But I do know that I wanted him to have like a giant head, almost like he's toppling over almost, and his head is gonna be held up by these like this broken crutch. That's pretty much all I got to go off of just in my mind, because with a lot of my sculpts I don't draw. I'm learning how to draw, but I can't draw, so a lot of the time I'm just going winging it off the fly, using what I know about anatomy and other creatures if I'm doing like a creature sculpt. Very important to learn about different animals, insects, so you can build up your what would they call that, like an image library in your head. So it's basically the more you learn about animals, creatures of the world we live on, right, the more you're going to gather information in your brain that you can kind of recall when you're making up designs, so you don't really have to use reference all the time. I'd say the goal is really to get to a spot where you don't have to use reference, but at the same time, it's always good to have reference. So I know there's like a big debate about that. Should you use reference? Shouldn't you not use reference? Is reference cheating? My take on that is reference is not cheating. I think that's very stupid to think as well, especially when like you're beginning. I think it's always good to have reference, just because when you think about it, if you want to do a character that, let's say, has samurai armor, right? Well, you don't know anything about samurai, you just can't wing it because you're not going to know what that armor looks like. So in situations like that, it's always good to have reference about that, do a little research, so you kind of build up that mental library, like I said. Same thing goes for creature design, right? You want to learn what you can about animals and insects and all that, so you can kind of refer to it later. But I do think you want to get to a spot where you don't always have to use reference. I feel like that's the goal for a lot of artists, not just sculptors, but drawers as well. Simon Lee, or goes by Spider Zero, fantastic sculptor, and he touches on this as well about not using reference and how you want to get to a place where you don't need to use it. You're just kind of following the form, almost like sketching in clay, if you think about it. Now, what does it mean when I say sketching in clay? Well, it's exactly how it sounds. You grab your clay and you just start sketching with it. Not like trying to draw on paper with clay, but you can kind of think of an illustrator, people who draw, and how they do rough sketches, right? They do rough sketches of their character, trying to find interesting poses, how they want their character to move, maybe look, stand, really building up on that foundation of the sketch, and then they bring it to like a refined stage, right? So it's all beautiful and glamorous looking, and it has the pose and all the forms and the anatomy that they wanted to have. Well, when you think of doing that in clay, it's kind of the same thing, except you're using clay. So what you would do is basically grab your clay and you just start to, use a pretty simple armature, and you start building on top of that. Do you want to do like a humanoid creature, a humanoid creature, or a human? It all depends on you, but you kind of follow the same principles as you would sketching on paper. You start with a rough draft or rough copy. Build up the forms, the anatomy, and then you try and find the movement of that sculpture, and then you kind of refine it until you get what you want. Honestly, Spider Zero does that, or Simon Lee, like I said, I don't know if he was like the creator of that, but I think it brought it to the industry because it was such a different way to do things. It's a very great way to quickly concept something and build off of that. And it's such a freeing process when you're doing clay sketching like that. I have done it, and I am kind of starting to lean towards that as well, because I can't draw, like I said. I am learning, which I mean, just because I've always wanted to learn how to draw. But sketching in clay, I will be having a video about that, because I did do one a little while ago now. I'm not sure how long ago it was. It was a little while ago. I used some dollar store clay, actually. Probably not the best clay to do it with, but I did figure out how to tweak that clay to make it work, if that makes sense. But yeah, I'll have a video coming out about how to sketch in clay pretty soon here, actually. But with this guy, I didn't sketch in clay. I had an idea that I wanted this dude to be Fallout inspired, because the show is so great. If you haven't checked out the show, be sure to check out that show. But I had an idea for this character. Like I said, I want him to have this like big head, like he was just engulfed with radiation, that his head just got too heavy, right? And expanded, and then he can't hold his head up. I also took some inspiration from, I'm not sure what the character's name is, in The Hills Have Eyes. There's a scene in the remake where they, I think they find this old nuke town. They run through the door and they find this dude, this like huge mutated cranium in a wheelchair, and his head is tilted back because he can't lift it because it's so big, right? And I like that idea, especially when it comes to like a Fallout inspired character, because of all the bombs dropping and all that as well. So I wanted this guy to look like he has this huge cranium and he's just riddled with radiation. But then the question is, how did this guy get like this, right? Well, the story that I gave this guy is that, he was born in the vaults. Since he's inspired by Fallout, I'm not going to say which vault, right? But he was, he was born in the vaults. But while his mother was pregnant, the doctors wanted to see what the radiation, would have on newborns. So slowly they started feeding his mother these radiation pills, kind of poisoning her, if you will. And when she had this guy, which he is nameless, so if you have a name for him or an idea for a name, definitely let me know in the comments down below. They were kind of disgusted with how he looked, honestly. So think of, like, picture this dude like this, but as a baby. So you can definitely see how hideous he would be. And yeah, he's pretty much was like a science experiment. Although, if Fallout, all the vaults were kind of like a type of experiment. And so as he was growing up in the vault, he of course was teased and ridiculed for how he looked, because he was different. And as the years went on, his cranium kept getting bigger and bigger, as well as he found it a bit harder to breathe the air inside the vault. He was almost like gasping at times. Maybe he thought he had asthma or allergies or something. But it was in fact that he was so riddled with radiation that the only way for him to properly breathe is if a place, had radiation in it. And it just made it easier for him to breathe, of course. So, throughout the years, he was ridiculed and made fun of. And, this really took a toll on him. He started to hate the vault dwellers. Just despise them and their stupid blue uniforms. One day, though, he started to hear voices. He thought he was going insane, hearing all these different voices inside his head. But he slowly realized that it was people's thoughts that he was hearing. He started to learn what people actually thought about him. And what he learned this one day would change him forever. How his mother actually felt about him. How she thought that he was a disgusting little swine of a creature. Not her baby boy that she wanted, but a deformed child that she never wanted. If she had an option to abort him, she would have. But at the time, the doctors said that everything was good, well, until he was born. What his mom said to him cut him really deep. But he found it weird that the doctors, would say something like that to her, because they would have the technology to know if the baby would be healthy or not. So he questioned this a little bit, and he started to seek answers by trying to read the medical staff's minds and the overseer. And by doing so, he found out what was really going on in this vault, that he was not the only one that was born this way. In fact, there had been many, many, many others like him, except they did not survive the pregnancy. He was the only one that survived being riddled with this much radiation. And, they're not too sure how he survived, but nonetheless, he did. And, well, after finding out about all this, let's just say he snapped. He hated these people for what they did to him. He had no choice on the matter, so he sought revenge by poisoning the food and water supply, which ended up killing everybody inside the vault. Now, this was not the end for him. Once he escaped the vault, he set forth a plan for himself to find other vault dwellers, other vaults, and to destroy them, to pretty much get revenge for what they did to him. He would not stop until every single vault dweller was dead. And that's pretty much the story that I have for this guy, this nameless Fallout-inspired character. I think it's very important to come up with a story for your characters or your creatures that you're making, either at the beginning or the end. For myself, I like to kind of make up the story as I'm creating these characters or creatures, because sometimes, I might think of an idea while I'm sculpting, but then go a different way, and then it's all about like, what if this creature was like this? What if this character did that? So you're kind of building up the story as you're going along, instead of just writing this story at the very beginning and then getting started with the character, because things change at times, and I just feel it's easier to make up the story when you're just in that creative process. Now you can see this guy's gotten pretty big. I was not expecting him to get this big, but I'm having a bit of a trouble here with his head because it kept kind of springing forward. At first it started to fall back because of the weight of the clay, but then it started to spring forward because I think the armature underneath. But we're able to tilt that head back and give him that kind of look like he's having issues holding his head up, which, when you have a cranium that big, you're gonna have that issue. To smooth out oil-based clay, or monster clay in the case, it's great to use lighter fluid, or you can also use charcoal. Charcoal starter fluid, which is stronger than lighter fluid, I have found out. But this is a great method to smooth out all the forms, those wrinkles. As you can see here, it's pretty smoothed out, so it works great. You just apply it on and brush away, even in the lips area, and just go over it. You do some wrinkles here, do some wrinkles there, brush it on. It'll soften those edges, and honestly, it looks pretty great. So you'll see me use the lighter here to smooth out some of the forms, but you also want to be very careful that you wait for the lighter fluid to dissipate. Sometimes you forget, and that's okay, but if you do forget to let it dissipate and you use the lighter, you might light your sculpt on fire. But don't worry, it's easy to put out. Just dab it out with a cloth or whatever. Stay calm. It's happened to me a couple times. But sometimes, you just have a mind fart. For this process of putting in these little veins in the head, I bought myself a wax machine, a heated wax pen, where you melt well, since monster clay is pretty much like a clay wax, you can melt the clay onto like this little spoon using this little pen, and you can make these really cool organic lines with it. It's a little tricky to use, at first. Especially when you have a head tilted like this. I had to lift it up and tilt him forward and make sure his face doesn't get smashed in by the table, and then use this pen. But it was a lot of fun. It was a different way to do veins. Really give this really cool organic shape to it, and it looks better once you smooth it out as well with the lighter fluid. And as you can see here, I used that same method with the spoon, but making like little little warts kind of on his cheek there. To put it in the clay and let it melt on top and bring it up, and you just dab it on and it sticks right to the clay. It's a pretty cool little machine. I know a lot of toy makers, they use this because they end up using wax to make finished copies of their toys. So I bought one of these, and honestly, it worked really great. I kind of like it too. Here, I'm trying to do a skin detail. Now, the whole skin detail on this guy, I'm not too happy with. So I got to figure out how to do skin detail a little bit better. But, I found a video on YouTube. I followed the process. Didn't turn out too great. I don't know, you guys might think otherwise, but for me, it's probably one of my least favorite things about this sculpt is the skin detail. But all you do is use a rake, and you poke little holes into the sculpt like it has pores, and then you use your lighter fluid, and you repeat the process over and over again until it looks like skin, pretty much. And yeah, I'm not a fan of how the skin texture turned out personally. Now it's time to make little accessories for this guy. So this guy is, well, he's out of the vault now and he's living by himself in a radiated field, of course, or radiated place. So I wanted to make some post-apocalyptic accessories. I've never really made accessories before. So this was definitely a new area for me, but learned a lot as well. So I wanted to give him like this goggle for his one good eye, because maybe the dust is blowing in his face and he needs like this one goggle to protect him. And it's just like a piece of glass sewn onto like a leather piece that wraps around his head. And here I'm making like a little holster, a little belt holster for him that's gonna have like this broken crutch right inside this leather holster, kind of holding up his head because, well, the dude has neck pain and he needs some relief. And you know, this is the apocalypse and he's kind of poor, so this was the only thing you think of to do, which, you know, when you don't have a lot, you kind of you MacGyver it, right? Or MacGruber it. MacGyver? Whichever. So yeah, it's me building the crutch out of some wire and clay, and you're gonna see the finished piece right here pretty quickly. Well, here he is in all of his glory. This took about 18 hours, days worth of work. Very heavy, like 10 pounds, maybe 12 pounds. Very proud of this one. I definitely pushed myself sculpting this dude, really getting into the facial anatomy of people, of humans, as well as making some accessories. I'm probably going to take the accessories off and maybe make him into a latex bust and do a little paint job. Not sure yet. Might 3D scan him and then 3D print him as well. But yeah, this is, I don't have a name for him yet. If you guys have a name, let me know in the comments down below. But hey, if you guys enjoyed the video, be sure to hit that like button, comment down below, and let me know what this dude's name should be. Subscribe if you haven't already. I got a couple new videos coming out, as well as some tutorials if you guys want to get into sculpting. If that intrigues you, be sure to follow. And as always, I'll see you in the next spooky art video.